I want to say welcome everybody to SportWorks Talks, and I forgot to put my microphone on as we sat down, so apologies for that little blip. Good afternoon and welcome. Great to have you all with us, and it's great to have Celine here with us today in Lausanne Olympic Capital. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much for inviting me today, and thank you as well to SportWorks for inviting me and giving me this chance to share this talk and this advice with you. I must say that public speaking is really not my cup of tea, but my passion is about really helping the most people find a fulfilling career, seeing them like blossom, be going to work energized every day. And that's why I accepted this talk, basically. Wow. So yeah, I'm really excited. And I must say that also transitioning career to fulfilling career and transitioning to follow your passion is a daring journey. And that embarking to that journey often requires to listen to your heart. And I believe that if you're listening to this talk today, it's probably that you already made this first step, listening to your heart. So very well done. And look forward to sharing some tips to help you move on with your journey.
Fantastic. I can't wait to hear them. So, as always, great to have you with us. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Lausanne. It's a little bit warm for us people who live in Switzerland nowadays. It's over 20 degrees, so it must be hot. But no, it's very comfortable, and it's great to have us with us. Also with us today, we've got a few people in the room who've been able to join us here today. So we've got a live audience as well. So great to have you with us as well. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. It's great.
Hello, everybody.
Still socially distanced. Good to see as well. Nicely spaced out. So as always, please, if you've got any questions, we're going to do a 20-minute presentation, thereabouts, and then we're going to do about 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. And if you have any questions, please just pop them in the chat, and we will get to those as we go through the presentation. At the end of the very end of the presentation. So for now, I'm going to hand over to Celine, and please enjoy this presentation. See you, Celine.
Thank you very much, Christian. So I'll start with this journey, to continue this daring and exciting journey. I'll start with a first thought, if you can, sorry. The first thought, which is one important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparation. A quote from Arthur Ashe, a famous US tennis player, who was the first American player to win 3 Grand Slam individuals and was the first black player selected for the US Davis Cup. And why do you think I selected this quote about preparation? Let's move on to slide 2. Well, because throughout my career, during these 15 years of career coaching, I realized that most common mistakes, there was one big common one, which was the lack of general preparation. Because when you do a transition, this preparation is going to be key at every single step of the process, steps which we're going to follow in the next coming slides. And aligned with this preparation, one of the other common mistake is the lack of self-awareness, which I will go deeper into after, the lack of market understanding, and then obviously the lack of action plan, because it's one thing to dream about what you want to do, but then it's taking actions towards making that true. And this win-win mindset as well is often lacking or lost into the process. So we can move to the next slide. So with that in mind, in order to avoid falling into these traps, I would advise to really go through different steps. The first one, which is knowing your product. Second one, which is knowing your market. Then once you know yourself, once you know the market, you've understood how to present yourself, where you can add value on that market. So you can start moving to step 3, which is focusing on designing a strategy. And then you're ready to market yourself. So we're going to go through these different steps throughout today's presentation. And what I invite you to do throughout these steps is to make some notes. That way, with the notes, it will help you, again, take some baby steps and actions and ideas towards getting even closer to this goal of yours to work in sports and follow your passion. So first step, knowing your product. And as you see on that first slide, what does it entail? It entails different elements. And the first one that I put at the core are the values. Why are the values at the center of everything? Because the values, our values, is really our essence. and these are stable. So it's really, really important in any career transition to really start with what are your values? What do you value in life? The more that you will do a job, the more that you will work in an environment that's aligned with your values, the more fulfilled you would be. And also, most of the time when it doesn't work out in a job or at a company is because there is a misfit in terms of culture. So really take the time to ask yourself about the values. And one way to find about your values, I mean, there are different exercises that you can do, list of values that you can go and find online, but also ask yourself about times that you felt drained and times where you felt energized. The time and the circumstances where you felt drained will give you indicators about that the values were not, your values were at stake and not respected. On the contrary, if you felt energized, most likely you were very much aligned in terms of values. So really, really take time to look at the values. And then the values will obviously impact the different other components. It will impact what your life priorities are, even though your life priorities can change along the way. Then it will also impact your preferred work environment. Let's say, for example, that you are someone that values integrity. If you work in an environment where people don't share information, where people lie, obviously you're going to be touching your values and not feel aligned. Just to give a quick example. If you value collaboration, same thing. If you work in an environment where people are very individualistic, this is not going to be a good place for you. So that's how it impacts the preferred work environment. It will also impact what are your goals and the vision, or even more the mission, and motivators. What do you mean by motivators is really what are your drivers in your work. So again, if I take an example in terms of value of, for example, rigor, if rigor is one of your value, then in terms of the motivator, in terms of what you need in your daily job, it could be that what you will need in your job is this ability to check that everything is done right. So perhaps you want to work in an integrity department, or you want to work in an auditing type of role. Other elements of the knowing your products is obviously taking the time to know what are your talents and what are your skills. And it's true that a lot of people, when I tell them, okay, what are your talents, they're not able to answer. Also because we live in a society where it's not really sometimes well appreciated to identify and to say what you're good at. It's seen as arrogant. And also the very natural talent, we're generally not aware of it, because we feel that if it's something that comes naturally to us, it's something easy. So it's not a talent, it's not a strength, it's not a skill. Whereas on the contrary, if it comes to you naturally, it's actually your area of natural talent. And the more that you're going to pursue a career that leverages on that natural talent, the more fulfilled you will be and successful you will be. And then you can look at your interest as well as an extra item to take into this knowing your product, but also for further brainstorming about the good different options that could be good for you. So looking at that first slide, on the scale from 0 to 10, how would you say that you know your product? First question, which perhaps you can answer on your notes. So 0 to 10, how much would you say that you know your product, that you know yourself? And then if you look at the different 7 dimensions, which one do you feel you would benefit from further looking into? So now let's move on to the second stage. Once you've started to get to know your product, these are just a couple of recommended readings to help you with this introspection. So I won't go into details, but just for you as a reference. I think the slides will be shared. I see some people in the audience wanted to take a picture, so I just wanted to say that I think the slides will be available. So now that you've started to know your product, you can move to the second stage, which is knowing the markets. What does it mean? So one thing is to know the players. And what I've seen in the sports industry is, like, when I work with AISTS, many people come to AISTS and say, yeah, I want to work in International Sports Federation. Well, the reality is that there's much more than just the International Federation as players. You have the organizing committee, you have the sports marketing agency, you have the clubs, you have the leagues, you have the not-for-profit. So there's really multiple players. So which of these players are you interested in working with, and are the most in line with your talents, values, and the first step that we looked at? Then for this player that is part of your target, what are the challenges? What are the trends in this sub-industry, for example, in the sports industry? And then what are the geographical specificities? Because depending if you want to work in Switzerland, in the US, in Canada, in the UK, the specificities will be different, also different in terms of the interviewing and recruiting practice. Also the salary scale. Because, for example, for people that want to come to Switzerland, it can be a really important element to be aware of when you make your career transition. We've had people, for example, at AISTS coming from the private banking or even banking general industry, making 130,000 Swiss francs a year. And then when they look for their first job in sports, they're more likely to get a 60, 65, 70,000 type of Swiss francs salary a year. So be aware and do your research on salary element as well, so that you make a conscious decision. And then what you also need to look at in terms of knowing your market is what are the profiles that are sought after by the recruiters and by these different players. If we can move to the next slide. I thought that it would be good to share with you some of the common skills that are often sought by recruiters. It's not exhaustive, it's just the most common ones. And this is based on a survey done by Sport and Dev, and also my observation working with sports recruiters throughout my 8 years at AISTS. So one of the first things is obviously team player and collaboration. In the sports industry, it's really, really key because you get to work with lots of different functions. So it's really, really important to have this team player collaborative team spirit. Being flexible, especially when you work in events or in smaller places where you get to do and help with lots of different things. So this flexibility is very important. And I would even say that in today's world, which has become even more and more volatile and uncertain, this flexibility, this adaptability has become, priority one for anybody, and I think for any talent for a company. Cultural sensitivity, because in the sports industry, you get to work with lots of people from lots of different countries. So showing that you can work with these different nationalities, different cultures is also very much appreciated. Stress resistance, and the practical problem solving. Also, especially when you work on events, because there's often some last-minute issues to deal with. So having this ability to remain calm under pressure is something very key. I would even say, I didn't write it, but I would say resilience. This is not only valid for the sports industry, that's really something that all the recruiters, all the companies are looking for now, again, even more now in this context. And again, project management skills, especially if you want to work in events, because it requires a lot of planning, a lot of risk mitigation, again, even more now. It can be good to have even a certification in project management if you want to work in the sports industry. And then you can see on the right-hand side that I listed some of the growing areas in terms of recruitment, accelerated by the COVID crisis. So you can see that there's, for example, digital sponsorship, due to the fact that a lot of events, physical events, have been now moved to like virtual events. So that's why it's becoming even more important, this digital sponsorship. Business intelligence, because organizations have even more pressure in terms of the money, and the budget is getting more and more under pressure. So this ability to understand And to make data speaks is really important. So that's another skill. Technology, again, because the growth of the digital virtual space is going to be a growing demand. Fun engagement, because the fun not being able to go on the physical event, you need to kind of keep it going. Athlete development, and generally speaking, education. If we can move to the next slide. These are just a couple of resources, but one thing that I really would like to highlight, because one way to find out about these different elements that I covered in knowing your market is some websites which give you some actuality, some trends like Inside the Games, which will inform you about what's happening in the Olympic family, sports business with more general any sports related news, Sport and Dev more for people that want to work in really sport for development. And then two websites that are very common, which are Global Sport Jobs, Jump in Sport, and also LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really, really a very powerful tool to get to know the market, and then further on in your application follow up. Why? Because with LinkedIn, you can really do some research and find out and observe what are the people, for example, if you want to become, let's say, work for team marketing, then you can look at the profile, you can do a search, you put team marketing at current company on LinkedIn, you will look at the profile of people, you'll see the type of role that exists and the type of background that they had to get to that type of role. That will give you some ideas about how to get there. And then volunteering. Volunteering is the best way to get to understand, to get really also for you, especially when you're making a big career transition, it's worth going through volunteering first to experience it on the field, to see if you really like it. Is it really like a reality check, basically? Because sometimes you have dreams and you think that everything is just like fantasy world and Disney world and everything is fantastic. And then when you get like your hands and feet on the ground, it's slightly different. So volunteering is one way, a really good way to kind of do this reality check. And two, it's a really good way to also showcase your skill and fill in this gap that you're lacking to do your transition. So we can now move to step 3. So once you know yourself and you've understood what the market needs, you can move to the next step, which is starting to focus, design an action plan. And why did I put this chart from Ikigai, Japanese concept? Because I think it really crystallizes very well what you should focus on in order to increase your chances of having and getting to this fulfilling step of a career. So the Ikigai concept is that your focus will be about really where's the crossover between what the market needs, what you love, what you're good at, and then what you can be paid for. And the more you're going to focus on that crossover and the more clarity that you have on that, the more your chances of success are going to be high. And so really, I invite you to really have that in mind when you move on. I realized, sorry, that step 2, I didn't ask you the questions. If you look back at the slide number 2, that on 0 to 10, how much would you assess that you know your market? And which of these different elements that I mentioned in my slide 2, to what extent do you know them, 0 to 10, and which one you could look at? And also who in your network could help you get this information? Okay, sorry about that. Now, if we continue with step 3 and continue with the next slide, please. It can also be interesting in step 3 to start looking and assessing your options to mitigate your risk. So you can see on the screen that there are 3 different levels: low risk, medium risk, and high risk. A low risk is typically when you bring 80% to the table and you're missing 20% of the skills, more or less. So it's generally the case when you either, for example, have a similar role, slightly enhanced, but in a similar industry. One concrete example is, for example, someone that we had that was working for a private golf club in the US. and was working in operation there. And then after AISTS, he was working for European Golf Association in events again. Then the second medium risk is typically when you bring 70%, more or less the table, and you're lacking about 30%. So it could be typically the case where you are in a new role, but in a similar industry, or you are in a similar role and you are in a new industry. A concrete example was one of our AISTS alumni that was working in brand consulting back in Spain. And then after AISTS, he joined team marketing as a marketing analyst. And then finally, high risk is when you would bring less than 50% to the table and you would be missing 50%. So it's generally when you change every dimensions. And also for some recruiters in sports like IOC, FIFA, UEFA, where there are so many people that want to work for these organizations. I mean, last time that I spoke to the recruiters at FIFA and IOC, for one job, they had received 450 applications, out of which 50 had exactly done the job. Like you were going through every single points of the job description they had done. So from that perspective, such recruiters would also fall into this high risk category. So looking at this different level of risk, I would invite you to think, if you're already to that stage of having your targets, look at your targets, look at your options. How much are falling in the low risk, medium risk, high risk? It might be that your targets are all in the high risk, and it's okay, and you're aware of it. But if it's not okay, then you might want to reconsider and rebalance your options and identify other targets that will lower and mitigate your risk better. And also, it might be that if you really focus only on the high risk, it might be that the journey towards your dream goal or dream job is going to be longer, even though sometimes it's not the case. And then I would really, again, invite you to do some voluntary work in order to get and shorten that journey towards your goal. So we can now move to the next slide. Thank you. So once you're very clear about your targets, then you're ready to market yourself. What are the different channels for you to market yourself? Nothing very new on that. You have the CV and the cover letter. So in terms of the CV, just a couple of tips, very, very briefly, because today is not the focus on CV, but generally speaking, if at least for Switzerland, I will say, because again, there are specificities depending on the countries. But for Switzerland, if you have less than 5 years experience, I would recommend a one-page CV. If you have more than 5 years experience, 2 pages is acceptable. That said, on page 1, you really need to have all your key information. And you really need to have a summary part or executive summary or value proposition part at the top of your CV, where you really, really highlight why you are a good fit for what the recruiter is looking for, helping yourself with the job description. So really having all this information in this teaser at the top of your CV is number 1 priority, and maximum 2 pages. The cover letter, and for the cover letter, I would say one big tip and one mistake to avoid, which I keep seeing a lot of times, is people writing a generic cover letter and they think that they can just change the name of the employer and they can use it forever. And same for the CV. It's not the case. All your applications should be customized, all of them. And the cover letter, again, if we think about the process that recruiters go through, for example, let's take IOC or FIFA. They would receive 450 or 300 plus applications. From these 300 or 400 applications, they will make a short list of 50 CVs. On what basis? Through a manual screening or an automated screening, but a lot still through a manual screening. So they'll have 7 seconds to 30 seconds in average to make a first selection of 50 CVs. So you can imagine how it is important to have a clear CV and to have the right keywords at the very top of your CV to grab the attention of the recruiter for them to look at your CV in more details. Once they have 50 CV in front of them, the aim is going to be to reduce it to 20. So they're going to look back at the 50, look into more details. When they have this 20, then only they're going to look at your cover letter. And so when you look at your cover letter, they really need to show that you have done your research on the organization that you want to work for. It's really, really important to demonstrate that research, because that will show you motivation, that will differentiate you from the other applicants. So one thing is this element of research in your cover letter with specific facts, instead of just saying that, okay, IOC is a major international governing body. Okay, everybody knows that. So research something that you've seen IOC, for example, if you apply for sustainability at IOC, look at what IOC has been doing in terms of initiative for sustainability and refer to that, or refer to an interview, or refer to an article. That's what I mean by facts and demonstrating research. And then only highlighting, that's valid for both CV and the cover letter, what is relevant only for the job that you are targeting. So that's for CV and cover letter. Then I put at the middle, elevator pitch and networking, building your network. Why? Because if you only focus on answering to the job that are published on the internet, you're looking at about 30% of the employment market only. And on that 30%, you have a lot of competition, as I mentioned before. So it means that there are 70% that's on the hidden market. And that's even more valid in the sports industry. So it's really, really important to get to know the people, to build your network, to showcase your skills to these people. And that's why, again, volunteering can be a really good way. And then having your pitch ready to introduce yourself to the people that you'll meet, and keeping the win-win mindset as well. And then we have the digital presence. In a recent survey that was done with recruiters at European scale, 60 to 70% of the recruiters said that they're actually now sourcing talents through LinkedIn and Facebook and other social media. So, especially to the younger generation, think twice about what you post on Facebook, Instagram. Make sure that you don't show yourself being drunk or that you find it funny. Well, actually, think about the image and what you want, how do you want to be seen by recruiters. So really make sure to carefully think twice about anything that you post, and also show some kind of consistency in terms of what you post on your digital, on your social media. And then in terms of interviews, when you're lucky to get to that interview stage, more and more interviews are now also coming with a 20-minute first screening. So that's why this introspection that we have spoken on at the very beginning is really key, because the more you really have some compelling stories, the more convincing you're going to be. I mean, if we think about sports is all about emotions. So the recruiters that you're going to have in front of you, a lot of them, most of them are going to be passionate people. So you need to really transmit this same passion when you answer to the questions. And one of the best ways to transmit this passion is not by saying that you're passionate, because all the other people are passionate, but it's with stories, it's with facts. So think about these stories to have them ready for the interview. And train yourself to speak in the camera, because also some of the more and more interviews are also through automated. So you speak to a computer basically and answer some pre-registered interview questions, and that's the first screening. So that's also important to train to speak into a camera. That's it for marketers. So when you look at that 4 steps, again, 0 to 10, how much do you feel that you are prepared in terms of your marketing documents? And looking at these 5 different dimensions, which one do you think could be improved? So we can move on to the next slide. So we came to the end of this 4 steps journey towards getting your fulfilling career. And I would really like to, I thought it would be nice to finish this talk with some very inspiring quotes and some very inspiring, I would say, thoughts. And I thought of Janet not sure how to pronounce her name, because she made a great job when she came for AISTS graduation last year, really encouraging our participants to pursue their dreams with a lot of anecdotes, with a personal story. Janet is an Olympian, British Olympian, who after some injuries, converted and is now working as a journalist for Sky TV, BBC, and Channel 5. And one of the first thing, one of the thoughts that I thought was worth sharing with you is that it's good for you to be aware that there might be a difference between how you feel your plan is going to look like and the reality. The reality might really include some roller coaster type of mode. And I think that being aware of that when you start your journey is going to make it easier for you. If we move to the second one, the second thought that I find inspiring and helping in that exciting and daring journey for people that are transitioning, for example, to the sports industry, is that every single steps, even though you might consider them as baby steps, but actually these baby steps can be even more massive than what you think they are. So every single steps is actually one step closer to your goal. And I also liked the quote from Kobe Bryant, I do whatever it takes to win games, whether it's sitting on a bench waving a towel, handing a cup of water to a teammate, or hitting the game-winning shot. I think it says it all. And it also says it all about how to consider volunteering. And there's, like, for example, there's an alumni of ours that of AISTS that was volunteering at a major event in London. And in his volunteering, he actually got to meet a very senior executive working at BT Sports. They just casually spoke. He was helping throughout his volunteering. And the senior executive told him, okay, what are you doing? And so he explained, oh, I'm studying at AISTS. And the person said, okay, and what are you going to do after AISTS? Well, I'm going to be looking for an internship after AISTS. And said, okay, well, come by and visit us. Well, he was hired, and now he's working in sponsorship at BT. So really keep that in mind to also take seriously the volunteering. So if you do volunteering, do it well. And then the last one, which I find also very inspiring and very helping in that daring and exciting journey of transitioning, I will first have you listen to the talk of Janet, and then I will conclude. If you can play the video, please.
Who you should be. I talk a lot to people about how it feels to be a child, because we were all children at one point. And I guess we all had different backgrounds, we all have different circumstances. But I guess one thing that rings true, when you're a kid, you have big dreams, don't you? You have massive dreams when you're a kid. And then all of a sudden you go to school, you get put in a bit of an institution, get put through a bit of a system. And sometimes that dream doesn't always have the room or the capacity to flourish. When does that happen? When can you be that person and say to yourself, actually, you know what? I'm going to go back to exactly what it is I wanted to do. And the choices that I'm going to make are going to be all around that. And it's about understanding the timing of those choices. You may have not had that choice when you were 18, but you may have that choice at 28. But then you may not have the resources at 28, you have them at 38. So it's about making sure you're in the right time and fitting things in the right place and letting things happen organically.
Thank you. So why do I find this quote so inspiring? Because indeed, I really agree that when we are kids, we have big dreams. And we also believe that everything is possible. And when you do a transition, you will also have a lot of people that will tell you, oh, it's impossible. Oh, it's so difficult. Oh. or they will say, oh, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? And they will try to kind of paralyze you with lots of different fears. So reconnecting to this inner kid of yours that believe that everything is possible, and having this drive and having this passion and being convinced that it's going to be possible is going to help you also overcome this roller coaster that I've told you about. So really go for it, believe in yourself, and continue this journey, make one step after the other, and turn your dream into reality. And now, thank you for listening, and I will do my best to answer to your questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great stuff. And wonderful to finish on follow your dreams and believe in your dreams. I cannot agree more. And having been fortunate to have worked in the sport industry for many years, I followed my dream, and it is a great industry, and it's a wonderful experience, and I share your passion for it. So it's wonderful. Thank you for a great presentation. Some great thoughts there. Gosh, know your product. I scored myself 8.5. I still have some areas there. Knowing your market. I really like the point you said about the diversity in roles that there are available. And I always use this reference point. There's an Olympic Games employs and mobilizes a workforce of around 200,000 people, if you think about the whole city coming to life. So that's a lot of jobs, that's a lot of people engaged, and a lot of people delivering lots of different services, and lots of different skills are required to deliver the games. And whether that's be from logistics through to technology to broadcast, so much diversity. So yeah, there is it's double-edged sword. You really do need to understand where you're going to focus your energy. So yeah, really great point. Volunteering. My gosh, we talked about this before the conversation, and I can speak from my own personal experience. I got my start in this industry by doing work experience. It was called work experience and volunteering, but I volunteered during my holidays a long time ago to go and work on an outside broadcast. And now I've worked on the games for the last 30 years. So I think there is a real great value in volunteering. Be curious. You've mentioned that many times, and look at the opportunities, because you don't know where that's going to take you. Great example of the guy from BT, working in BT Sport. There is opportunities, and I really echo that point. Focus and design your career. Very cool. And yes, it gets back to kind of knowing your product, being clear about where you want to go. Really key point.
And really also, besides knowing, is taking actions, and sometimes also having a systematic approach. Because again, in that process, which can be this roller coaster, sometimes you lose track. So working in a systematic way, where perhaps you have a list of target organizations, and you go back regularly to those targets. And depending on the feedback that you get, your research that you do, some of the targets that you have are going to go and disappear from this target list, and you're going to add some new ones. So that's a really good way of also systematically managing this process.
Yeah, and it's another point you made that only 30% of jobs are posted. I think we had another presentation here last week, and that point was made that you really need to get underneath the water level to get under the bottom of that iceberg, to really try and find those roles. So doing that work is key to that.
Yeah, Dominic Goba.
Yeah, Dominic was great.
That, yes.
And marketing yourself. Customize the cover letter. My gosh, I've received so many applicants that I've gone, oh my gosh, they copy paste that. Please, I please implore you, please think about who you're authoring your letter to, who you're writing to. So important. It's such a simple thing, seems so, but when you're trying to get a job and you think quantity and let's get out there, I've got to do the work, but don't underestimate the value of personalizing that letter.
And beyond that, because I realized I didn't say it because it's so obvious, but I see it so often, is besides the customizing, is spelling mistakes.
Oh gosh.
Spelling mistakes and typos. Please, that's really simple. Make sure that you proofread and proofread and proofread your letter. The mistake is that sometimes some people wait till the last minute to apply, and they're running out of time, and then they're sending their documents. But really, I was also a recruiter, so if I see some typos or spelling mistakes, it's going to the bin.
Yeah.
So, it's simple.
And there's a lot of good technology out there to help us with that nowadays. I'm just saying, I raise this point because there are a lot of great tools, and there is no real excuse, unfortunately. I don't think for spelling. Anyway, so that's a good point. And your digital presence, I think that is key. Be responsible, but also look at all the avenues. Think about how and I think we talked about this about personal branding, which is another whole theme. It's a key point to bring up. So I think, think about all the facets of how you present yourself online.
And it's a real opportunity to do this personal branding for you and to grow your brand.
Yes.
And by building your brand and being proactive on the social media that are now being considered by the recruiter, it also is a way for you to tap into this hidden market, because people will come and call you, which is ideal.
Absolutely. So great. I love the 4 steps. Thank you so much for sharing them. So I'm just going to go into a couple of questions we've got coming from online here.
Sure.
So from Guy, thanks for the question, Guy. A question, volunteering is absolutely essential. As you say, we agree, becomes much more beneficial if there is a mentor to provide some introduction and demonstrate networking. Where is networking skills ranked in the essential skills from your perspective?
I would say very high, to be honest. And perhaps because a lot of people, they're really afraid of networking. And I perhaps would, and I think Dominic also mentioned it, I would replace networking by building relationship. Okay, and if we speak about building relationship, I would say yes, they are essential. They're really essential. They're not only essential to do a career transition, they're essential in your day-to-day life and in your day-to-day career. I mean, even when you work at a company, building relationship with people is valuable. So definitely, I would say necessary, required skills.
And it is something you have to do inside the organization. I think it's a key point you just made. Networking happens, and it's building the relationships. And we had a colleague here visiting today who I met through delivering logistics in Rio. And again, you build these relationships on site, especially in major sport events. If you're working in the event and operations side, it's those personal relationships which gets things done. So it is really key. And it is, the buzzword networking can be quite overwhelming. I'm not, I just have visions of me in a tie and handing out a business card. That's not what it's about. It's about being personal and being authentic.
It's being authentic. It's showing genuine interest in the others. When you speak to people, is asking questions, listening to them, really listening, not trying to sell yourself. It's listening, asking questions, and also it's building a relationship also on a personal way, not only on the professional. That's also a really key important element in the relationship building and offering you help.
Yeah, great. So another question here from Michelle. Hi, thanks Michelle for your question. So when you're in a selection process, how do you know if your values are congruent with the culture of the organization? And when you're already inside an organization, what do you do when you realize that your values are maybe incompatible with the culture of the organization? Good question.
Okay. So what can you do to assess the value fit before you get into the organization? That's the first part of the question, right? So what can you do before? Well, one of the things that you can do is speak to people that have worked in this organization and ask them what was their experience like. And more specifically, since hopefully you have done your work on your own values, you can say, okay, well, my values are X, Y, and Z. And then you ask to these previous employers, how would you say this value is being lived on the workplace in this company? So that's one way. Then you have Glassdoor, which can give some indication as well to take in consideration a little bit, but not to the word, I would say. And then you can also ask questions during the interview process. That's also something that is totally okay for you to ask. So, for example, if the organization says that they value X, Y, and Z, you can tell them, okay, well, I've seen that on your website, you say that you value X, Y, and Z. How do you really live it on a daily basis? Also, a good way to get a question that you can ask to assess the value is asking the employer how they assess the performance of their staff members. Generally, that gives you also a good indication. So that's what can be done before. Then what you can do after, if you realize that there's a misfit in terms of values, is it a misfit in terms of values with your line manager, or is it at an organization level? That's different. So ask this to yourself, and then depending on the level of discrepancy between your values and the values either of your line manager or the organization, then it's your own decision is to what extent can you cope with that and for how long, or you don't want to cope and then you look for something else.
Yeah. Ultimately, you have the choice.
Exactly. You always have the choice.
And that's an important point. I also think it's key what you're saying about the interview is a two-way interview. Mm-hmm. I think someone coached me in that a long time ago and said, you're interviewing them just as much as because it is about building a relationship with the company you're going to join. And it's a big commitment that you're making just as much as they are making. So, and I also find that when people come to me and I'm interviewing and they've got a vested interest in my organization or the project I'm working on, I'm far more interested in them as a person because they've actually done their homework and they're interested to know what it is about the project and what it is about my organization. So it actually works both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
really
totally.
So thanks for that question, Michelle. So I've got one other question here. I was wondering what is your opinion about providing feedback to the applicants by recruiters? I wish there was more of it for the final round applicants. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yes, I can only agree. I mean, when I was a recruiter, I was always offering feedback to the people that I was interviewing because I think that it's respect. I mean, the candidate has taken time to come to the interview, so we're here to also help them. So it's important to give feedback. But it's true that in reality, not many recruiters do it. And I personally, because I work a lot with recruiters as well, especially as my work with AISTS. And when recruiters give feedback, I tell them, I'm very appreciative. I say, well, thank you very much for giving feedback, taking the feedback, giving the feedback to our participants, because not many recruiters take the time so that I spread the word about and encouraging about this feedback culture, because you're totally right that it should happen automatically. Yeah. Now, sometimes it's just that they're, especially in the sports industry, sometimes they're not even HR people, and they're understaffed, so they already have so much to do that giving feedback on the top of that is not on their priority, not to give excuses, but to also explain the context. But I totally agree, and you can count on me to further spread the word about this feedback.
Yeah, it's a good key point. Look, we've reached time today, and I know there's a few more questions in there. So what I'm going to say is we'll answer those, Celine will answer those questions for you, and we'll pop them onto the sportworker.com/ the forum, which will be linked to this presentation, which will go out afterwards. So I want to say thank you all very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having Celine here. Great to have a few people here in SportWorks. Thank you so much for making it in. I know it's difficult at these times, but it's really grateful to have a live audience. So I want to say thank you, Celine, and thank you everybody for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again. In the meantime, please stay safe, and bye for now.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you all for the attendance, and hopefully it's been useful to you. Have a wonderful week.
Cheers, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.